The Vietnam War. The Vietnam War, also known as the Second Indochina War, was a conflict that took place from 1955 to 1975. It was fought between the Communist forces of North Vietnam, supported by the Soviet Union and China, and the non-Communist forces of South Vietnam, supported by the United States and other anti-communist nations. The war had a significant impact on both Vietnam and the world, resulting in immense loss of life and profound political, social, and cultural changes. Causes of the Vietnam War. The causes of the Vietnam War can be traced back to several factors. One primary cause was the division of Vietnam into two separate entities: North Vietnam, led by Ho Chi Minh and his communist forces, and South Vietnam, led by Ngo Dinh Diem. The division occurred after the withdrawal of French colonial rule in 1954. The United States viewed the spread of communism as a threat and sought to prevent its expansion in Southeast Asia. Another factor that contributed to the conflict was the Cold War rivalry between the United States and the Soviet Union. The United States feared that if South Vietnam fell to communism, it would lead to a domino effect, with other countries in the region also succumbing to communist influence. Furthermore, there were underlying tensions within South Vietnam itself. The government of Ngo Dinh Diem faced opposition from various groups who were dissatisfied with his leadership and reforms. This internal strife created a volatile environment that further fueled the conflict. Course of the war. The Vietnam War can be divided into three main phases: the early phase, 1955 to 1965, the escalation phase, 1965 to 1968, and the de-escalation phase, 1969 to 1973. During the early phase, North Vietnamese forces, known as Viet Cong or National Liberation Front, NLF, conducted guerrilla warfare against South Vietnamese government forces. The United States provided military aid and advisory support to South Vietnam but did not have a significant combat presence at this stage. In 1965, the United States escalated its involvement in the war by launching large-scale bombing campaigns and deploying ground troops. The goal was to prevent the collapse of South Vietnam and to weaken the North Vietnamese forces. However, the conflict became increasingly brutal and protracted, with both sides suffering heavy casualties. The de-escalation phase began in 1969 when President Richard Nixon implemented a policy known as Vietnamization. This involved gradually withdrawing American troops while increasing the responsibility of the South Vietnamese military for combat operations. The Paris Peace Accords were signed in 1973, officially ending direct U.S. involvement in the war. However, fighting between North and South Vietnam continued until April 30, 1975, when North Vietnamese forces captured Saigon, now Ho Chi Minh City, leading to the reunification of Vietnam under communist rule. Impact of the Vietnam War. The Vietnam War had far-reaching consequences that affected both Vietnam and other nations involved. Human cost. The war resulted in a staggering loss of life. It is estimated that between 1 and 3 million Vietnamese civilians died, along with approximately 1.1 million North Vietnamese and Viet Cong fighters. The United States suffered over 58,000 military fatalities, and thousands more were wounded or went missing in action. Political fallout. The war led to significant political changes in both North and South Vietnam. Following the reunification of the country, Vietnam became a socialist republic under communist rule. In the United States, the war sparked widespread anti-war protests and social unrest, leading to a loss of public trust in government institutions. Global implications. The Vietnam War had broader implications beyond Vietnam itself. It deepened Cold War tensions between the United States and Soviet Union, as well as China. It also influenced the perception of American military power and shaped subsequent U.S. foreign policy decisions. Veterans and PTSD. The war had a lasting impact on the mental health of veterans from various countries involved. Many soldiers experienced post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, and struggled with readjustment to civilian life. Environmental consequences. The extensive use of chemical herbicides, such as Agent Orange, during the war resulted in long-term environmental damage and health issues for both Vietnamese civilians and veterans.